Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers. And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 9, Episode 63. That's Dave Bryan. I am Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Happy Wednesday to you, Steelers Nation. Dave, were you rummaging through the attic yesterday? I saw some photos of a much younger Dave Bryan who could have gone pro if it hadn't just been for that knee injury back in high school, right?
Yeah, if only that. Actually, it was a busted ankle. Got landed on during a football practice and busted that up. Yeah, my mom occasionally sends a batch of photos she comes across and all, and I didn't see any of my mug shots in there, so that's that's a positive there. But yeah, undersized quarterback with no arm strength. And a very bad 70s kind of bowl haircut.
Well, if Nathan Peterman can get a job, then I think you could have had a shot too. So always hope for you.
No, I was a major disappointment in all areas as a child.
Well, so is Nathan Peterman, so really not much of a difference. But some actual professional players that were rewarded yesterday. Pro Bowl rosters announced for the 2019 Pro Bowl. 6 Steelers go: James Conner, Antonio Brown, David DeCastro, Marquise Pouncey, Alejandro Villanueva, and Cam Hayward. I know people will talk about the snubs of Juju and Ben and TJ Watt, and I don't really care about the Pro Bowl too much. I don't get too worked up about the snubs. I just celebrate the guys that made it. But any initial reaction of the 6 Steelers that hopefully won't go to the Pro Bowl but were voted in?
Yeah, look, DeCastro, obviously one of the best guards in the AFC. Alejandro's had a great season. I mean, there's no two ways around that. More deserving, I think, this year than last year, right?
For Villanueva?
Right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This has been his best year by far.
And you could. I'm sure there's good arguments to be had out there that maybe Pouncey, maybe another center deserved it over Pouncey. But there's a lot of name recognition that obviously goes on with this thing. Fan voting supposedly plays a third of it, third of a role in it, and obviously you had Conner, Antonio Brown, Villanueva, Pouncey, DeCastro were all leading vote getters in the fan portion at their respective position. I think Conner finished 7th overall in fan voting, and Antonio was right behind him in fan voting. Hard to keep those two guys out when they receive that many votes there. Look, I mean, no two ways about it. You can make a good argument that Juju probably deserved it more than Keenan Allen did, statistically speaking. I think an argument some will try to make against that, if they're Chargers fans, will be, well, look, Juju plays opposite Antonio Brown, and Keenan's a number one and has to probably face his share of double coverages and all like that. I get all that. I get that today's a day that snubs are talked about. A lot of people will try to say, TJ Watt got snubbed statistically. I see that, but I mean the tape to me kind of says otherwise. From the pass rushing category, yeah, he's had a lot of pressures and all. His sacks. I mean, this might have been. I don't know what'd you think. The sack that he had against the Patriots might have been his highest quality one of the season, right?
Maybe of his entire career. I mean, I had to go back and think about them all. It's only been 2 years, but yeah, it was one of the better ones he's had.
And then there's the whole maybe Ben deserved it more than Rivers and Brady. I know it's not this simple, but maybe if Ben throws a TD on that final drive against the Broncos versus an INT, the Steelers have another win, and that's another comeback, victory for Ben, if you will. So who knows? But I didn't lose. I lost sleep last night, but it wasn't because of any other Pro Bowl selections. Let's just put it to you that way.
unrelated Dave Bryan reasons. Yeah, I was just happy to get 3 of the 5 starting offensive linemen in. That those are the guys I get the most excited about, or the big guys up front, because it is so tough for them to get recognition because of the position they play. There are no really stats kept for them. So to get the cash to Pouncey and Villanueva in is just awesome to me. And yes, I think Juju was absolutely worthy to get in. Would I put him over Keenan Allen? Personally, I probably would, but that's my own bias, and I think you make a good point about Chargers fans saying, well, Keenan Allen is the guy out there in LA, and Juju gets the benefit of AB being doubled up. So just happy for the guys to come in. James Conner, did you see the text that he posted from Aaron Donald whenever Conner was diagnosed with cancer and saying, you're going to get through this and going to make a Pro Bowl?
Yeah, I did. That was quite a look. I mean, his story it still continues, as Mike Tomlin says, continues to write itself, I guess. And what a great season he's had. And hopefully he'll be able to resume that season starting Sunday against the Saints. That's
probably a good segue to get into our Tomlin talk. Tomlin, of course, had his Tuesday media press conference yesterday. You want to go over the injury report? Steelers seem to be in pretty good shape here.
Yeah, overall, of course, as I always like to caution, as I've learned over the years, things sometimes aren't always what they seem, especially when Tomlin gives a rundown. But, going by that and that alone, Cameron Hayward came out of that game with a hyperextended knee. I believe he finished and returned to that game. Bud Dupree had a knee, what do you call that, a knee contusion? A knee bone bruise or something like that, and I think he was able to return for some. Once he left and came back. Obviously, let's see who else was there. James Conner, he updated his status and said that Terrell Edmonds showed up Monday and was placed in concussion protocol, so we'll have to go through all the stuff at the beginning of this week, starting today with practice. Hopefully, he's cleared up enough where he'll be able to start the early stages of getting back on the field there. Tomlin talked about James Conner with his pre-existing ankle injury. He says he saw him downstairs getting rehab just a few moments ago. Hopefully that sets the stage for a productive Wednesday, and we'll go on from there. And, as always, we'll let the effectiveness and participation be our guide and make the decisions at the appropriate time as we push forward into the game. And I do believe, other than maybe some bumps and bruises associated with the play of football, that was it.
Yeah, I think that we'll see what happens with Edmonds, because concussion protocol, there's no certainty guarantee. He's got to go through all the steps to get out of protocol. But it sounds like, and tell me if you agree or disagree, that Hayward, Dupree, Conner will play this weekend. It doesn't sound like they're going to be missing anybody unless Edmonds sits, and we'll have to just wait to see where that one ends up.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to make any bold predictions on Conner because
I will. I'll say it plays.
All right. Well, hopefully he does. It's been 2 games already. He did practice on a limited basis last Friday. He ended the week on Friday as questionable, and then they downgraded him to doubtful on Saturday. So that probably wasn't a huge surprise, being he only went limited to 1 practice. So if he's able to get out there and go limited to full today, that's obviously going to be a great sign for him.
Definitely. Anything else to get with you from Tomlin? That was a pretty low-key, uneventful press conference for coming off a big Patriots game. So I didn't have a ton, but anything that Tomlin said that kind of really caught your eye?
Not overall. Let's see. What was he did talk about Ben's ribs and all, and said no worse for the wear coming out of that as well too. So I guess that's worth highlighting, glossing over real quick there. He was asked about the counter toss in the running game. He says within the framework of our offense, we've run that play regardless of who's at running back. That's not a surprise there. He did, talk about Chris Boswell and, said, he was asked, were you satisfied with what Chris Boswell did in so many words? He says, I'm not into that satisfaction word. We are ready to move forward with him this week or move forward this week. And then asked with Chris Boswell, he said yes. So it doesn't sound like there's going to be any change or kicker competition, this week with Boswell. So look, props to him. He's got the patience of Job, with him and Artie Burns as well, too. I was surprised that he wasn't kind of peppered a little bit more about, how Artie, was pulled from that game. Right
Mm-hmm.
after that first possession there. I have a theory, and it's a theory only on this. Just the fact that he praised after that game. He praised Artie of having a good week of practice, and I think his way to reward Artie was to get him out there with the starters for a series. Maybe his plan all along was to get Artie in for one series and then out, and then maybe that escalated even more because of what happened on that touchdown play. And I think, you've broken it down, and I've looked at it multiple times. It's certainly based on the way the Steelers have tried to cover that that Yankee concept in the past, that the onus belongs on Sean Davis. Now, do we know that for sure? No. There's other ways you can cover that, but that's the way it at least looks based on, basically what you did. I mean, you had like 6 or 7 instances, I think, on there in the past. I will continue to say that mesh point, as deep and as good as that was close together, sure made that thing a little bit more difficult to cover. But, I think Sean Davis still, was there a proper communication on that play? No.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's where I was going to go, because I think there is a communication element that maybe they're making a late check and something doesn't get. Because you see in the all 22 Haden and Davis talking to each other. I don't see any communication with Burns. So, it's when you look at something that goes wrong, it is harder to know when things go right and to be able to evaluate that. But we base it off of how the Steelers have played that concept in the past. And I do disagree with the idea. I know it's just your theory that Tomlin intended on Burns to only play for one series. That's a little too far for me.
All right, so you think that one play had something to do with it then?
Well, I mean, I still think it's on Davis, but I don't think that was Tomlin's plan, regardless of what happened, to only play Burns for a series or give him kind of throw him a bone for as a reward for a good week of practice. That doesn't make sense to me, because then Sensabaugh has limited reps and he's playing most of the game, and that's not an ideal situation for him to be in.
I think what people are still struggling with is, why did Tomlin come out right away unprovoked to say, let me just be clear, that wasn't on Artie Burns,
Well, I think he did that, and it's just my guess is that I know that obviously Tomlin isn't on Twitter or listens to the fan or whatever, but he knows, I'm sure, the reputation that Burns has for the general criticism that he gets for all the struggles and how underwhelming his career has been. So I think he was trying to at least do his part in getting ahead of, everyone piling on Artie Burns, because I'm sure most people thought it was on him, and just in that regard trying to do Burns a solid by saying, hey, that's not on him. I'll take the fall for that one.
Yeah, like I said, he went out of his way too to say that Artie had a good week in practice, so that tends to make me believe that it was a throw a bone at him in that first series. Now, had they gone 3 and out, on that series, would Artie have stayed in the game? We'll never know.
Yeah. Well, I think Artie's a good dude, and I think Tomlin likes him and likes the work ethic. Those have never been issues with Artie Burns. It's just been translating everything and getting consistent, steady, trustworthy play, and that's never been Artie's thing, unfortunately, which is kind of important for a cornerback or any professional football player. One thing that Tomlin did say...
real quick with him. With Artie, I think a lot of his struggles have to do with some football IQ.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that.
I think a lot of it has to do with him not, from one play. I just don't think he does a great job of understanding sometimes what he's looking at, and maybe they don't do a good enough job communicating with him on the field as well too. And make no mistake about it, coming out of Miami as an underclassman like he did, and then I even keep going back all the way back to that his final year at Miami, where he wasn't on the field every play. Mm-hmm. And you mix in on top of it that he probably wasn't in the football classroom per se a lot during the off season because he ran the track and all like that. That probably didn't help improve his football IQ. So athletically, he's a good, he's fine. But and obviously you probably much rather see him in more man-to-man situations, but you just cannot throw him out there and let him play every snap, man on man.
Yeah, and even in man coverage, he's had his own struggles, so it's not been perfect there either. One player that Tomlin did mention repeatedly, I think once he talked about it at the opening of his press conference and then asked about it later in it, was Vince Williams. And I thought it was super interesting with Vince Williams because he was the 3-down linebacker this week, only missed 3 snaps, and that was whenever he got dinged and had to get looked at by trainers. So he became the 3-down backer against New England, where that's usually been more LJ Fort's spot as being a 3rd-down guy. And it sounds like the reason for that, because that was my question, why, was communication and the trust that Tomlin and Butler have and Vince Williams to communicate. And obviously communication was going to be so important to do all the things they were going to do, all the volume to defend New England. So Tomlin said, quote, I can't say enough about our ability to communicate. I can't say enough about Vince Williams and what he was able to do in terms of being a central communicator throughout the game. It allowed us to settle in and match some of the pace things they do and things they do very well. I thought communication was an element of that performance. So hats off to Vince Williams because the Steelers ran a ton of different packages, ton of different coverages, and I thought, and it's tough to see sometimes, but Williams' ability to communicate all that, and aside from the Hogan bust, there really wasn't a lot of big communication errors. So big credit to Vince Williams for shouldering that load and doing a good job.
And I was surprised he played as much as he did.
Me too, but it sounds like because they trust him to communicate, because Tomlin said before the game it's about volume, having a bunch of different packages and schemes and coverages to beat the Patriots. You can't just do one thing. So you need a guy out there who can communicate all that, and clearly they trust Vince Williams to do so.
Do you think we'll see that same amount from him this weekend against the Saints?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, it worked well last week, so, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You hold the Patriots to 10 points, and you're going to have volume to defend the Saints because they are kind of a similar beast. So, yeah, I think you probably will.
What else did he have to say? I don't believe I don't believe that that he didn't know the Ravens play the Chargers on Saturday.
Honestly, he might not. It's the end of the year. You're in your bubble. You care about the stuff you can control. Football coaches are weird. So, I wouldn't be surprised.
He also explained, and so did Ben, during his radio show, talking about what led into the decision for them to take the football instead of deferring on Sunday against the Patriots when they won the toss, and said, plain and simple, we didn't want to give Tom Brady the ball. That's a pretty good reason.
Yeah, and to score first, and it worked out well. It was the first time since I think the 2011 victory against New England the Steelers had scored first, regardless, not just received the opening possession, but just scored first general in the game against New England. So they knew that was going to be a big element of it if they could go down the field, get points on the board early, kind of take some pressure off the defense. And it worked out well. So, yeah, it was flipping the script for Pittsburgh because usually they defer a kick, but I'm fine with that. Tomlin asked if they were going to receive again against Drew Brees, and he said, we'll see. So we'll see what happens.
I think the only other kind of thing, Ben talked earlier in the morning, of course, on 93.7 The Fan, and the highlight that came out of the main talking point, I guess, if you will, or really two of them, I guess, was him banging on Ian Rappaport again and that cracked ribs report that he had. First thing, I think, Sunday morning there. Doesn't want Ian Rappaport's name brought up on his radio show anymore. Yeah, I get that. The same Ian Rappaport several years ago that said Ben was going to request a trade, yada, yada. I thought the other interesting thing was what Ben had to say with the whole 5 wide receiver thing.
Yeah. Now, you had pointed out that they ran 5 receivers, 2011? I think they ran out a little bit this year too.
I think only I'll have to see what Matthew has on the chart.
Matthew said they've done it this year,
but they haven't done. If they've done it, they've only done it 1 or 2 plays.
Yeah, I think it was literally 1 snap against Denver. I think he said.
All right, and I think that matches up to what I have, and I think what do I have for them running that against the Patriots 17 times?
I don't have the number in front of me, but it was a lot. It was Eli, Switzer. They had 6 guys active, and they used pretty much all 6.
Yeah, and I was surprised to see them. Well, look, we knew something was up with all those guys dressed, for the game. Obviously, you knew you were going to address Eli Rogers. You could make an argument that James Washington could have been inactive, in lieu of maybe a guy like Brian Allen and all like that. But I mean, that was probably a sign right there alone. They dressed on that many guys, but that many wide receivers. Look, I mean, I think that helped in the game plan, and we talked, I think, a little bit about that the other day when we were on. That you put those wide receivers out there and you go empty as many times as they did. It really makes the opposing defense declare early on that. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure I'm buying Ben, if I don't have the quote in front of me, saying we didn't even know. I was kind of telling guys what to do out there. I'm not buying all that. I mean, I can't believe it was that much drawn up in the sand as you go with 5 wide receivers during the game.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a little bit of Ben hyperbole, as you might say, but they don't do a lot of 5 receiver stuff, so they might not, they just got Eli back, so it probably really hadn't been something they had focused on too much. But again, I really like Randy Fichtner's game plan, being able to go multiple and spread the field out, and I think, as I said Monday, kind of give New England a taste of their own medicine because it was effective.
Yeah, it was. All right, what else? What else stuck out? I mean, I tweeted out earlier a few days ago about how many times they ran. Had the tight end on the move on kind of those counter plays that we saw Jalen Samuels run. I think 3 or 4 of those times included that toss, sort of that read. I guess you'd call it a read counter. A read counter toss in those situations there. I think those really helped Jalen Samuels get a good read of what was happening in front of him on those plays. And I think all but about maybe 4 running. He only had 19 in total. And I think when you add in Ridley's few, I think only 4 or 5 plays in total was there not either a tight end or an offensive lineman on the move at the snap of the football. Now, a few of those I think came when the Steelers were down deep in their own end. The few snaps that actually Rosie Nix played, where you're just trying to run right into the middle of the pile, give yourself a little bit of breathing room. And I'm trying to think what the other instance was, but I think. I liked it, obviously, seeing those guys on the move like that, especially with a very inexperienced running back, if you will, to help him see the field. And I think the numbers speak for themselves with the amount of yardage that he had on the ground. And I think those counters with the tight end on the move, 7 or 8 of them, I forget what number was, 70 or 80 yards on those runs, and also highly effective.
Yeah, I believe it. Just getting downhill, quick, easy read, and then explode downhill, follow your blockers. Yeah, the line did a great job. Ramon Foster and the whole line played great, but Foster just continues to stick out to me. His run blocking, his pass protection, the physicality he has, the holes he opened up. Even on the goal line one you mentioned that Ridley had that went for like 12 yards. Check out Foster on that play, sealing down the 3-tech and creating that lane for Ridley to hit and run through. So just hats off to the line, gave big runways, and I thought Samuels and Ridley, so more especially Samuels, obviously, showed some physicality, showed that downhill vertical ability they didn't have against Oakland, where guys just weren't physical enough. And so I thought it was a great response from the Oakland game where things were sloppy. The intensity didn't seem there. The level of energy didn't seem like it needed to be and what we're used to along this offensive line. I thought they rose to the challenge against New England, and that was great to see.
I agree, and I think the wide receivers on a couple of those plays too. Antonio Brown, I think James Washington, I think he had a good block on one of those as well too. So they great job all the way around running the football, and it just goes back to you don't have to run it a lot. You just have to be effective when you do run.
No joke, this is Antonio Brown's best blocking season ever. I know that's probably the last thing people care about, but he's honestly given his best effort and his best blocks this year. And I don't know why, but I'm happy to see it.
Yeah, he's stuck out a lot. I mean, look, even after the Juju big 90-something yard play, he was took out. Who was it? Chris Harris on that play? I forget it. Was it against the Broncos?
Yeah.
That he did that. I forget if it was Harris or a safety or whatever. But yeah, and we've seen James Washington's physicality, willing to do the dirty work, if you will, back in his college career. And Tomlin and Roethlisberger went out of their way to praise not only the play of Samuels but Washington in that game. And as we talked just the other day, now is an important time for James Washington, particularly to build on, what we saw in that game against the Patriots.
Sure, and hopefully this is going to springboard him. I like the effort, even the 9-yard catch that he had. Honestly, for all the big plays he had, the 32-yard catch on the sideline, the 24-yard reception and broke the tackle of the corner. I thought his 9-yard reception was maybe his most impressive rep because it showed a lot of elements, his ability to create space, his IQ to run away from man coverage, get involved in a scramble drill, and then make a nice snag over the middle of the field. So I thought he saw kind of all the components of what Washington was billed as coming out of Oklahoma State, his vertical ability, his hands, his IQ, his work ethic, some of those traits, his physicality. And so I thought you kind of got a little bit of everything on just 3 catches on Sunday.
All right. What about on the defensive side of the football? We saw them do a better job of disguising coverages, I think, in this game. We saw sometimes where the safeties would two safeties start out low with with 3 safeties on the field, and then rotate 2 of them back at the snap of the football with the free safety coming in at times to give kind of a more of an, I guess you kind of call an inverted look at the snap of the football. I thought they did a good job of keeping the safeties over the top of Edelman and Gronk in that game. We talked about that. What else did you see defensively that stuck out to you?
Yeah, and to the Steelers' credit, they have throughout the season, not just the Patriots game, worked better to disguise coverages as you've gotten more comfort and health in the secondary. Edmonds getting more reps and Burnett being available more, and you had the injuries to Haden and Hilton early in the season. So they've worked towards trying to disguise things a little bit better, but I thought Sunday was probably the most creative they got in terms of disguising some of their looks and coverages. It was just interesting to see the personnel and the formations. The Steelers did not run a single snap out of nickel on Sunday, which is the first time in probably forever that's happened. They were either in their base 3-4 or they ran dime with Morgan Burnett. So when they went sub, they went sub when they tried to get some of the athletes on the field. And so that was one of my biggest takeaways, and it seemed effective. So they even did a little bit of kind of a big dime, a 3-2-6 with 3 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, and the dime package in the secondary. So yeah, some interesting personnel groupings, really kind of tailoring the game plan specifically for this game to make it work against Tom Brady.
And not to be all, to add in a little objectivity and counterbalance, as well as the defense did play. They obviously gave up the big play early, the touchdown. I think Brady was 10 for 10 on play action in that game, which makes you wonder why didn't he use it a little bit more? And one of those play actions was the big gainer to, was it Edelman, where everybody bites. Burnett comes up and really takes out, who was that? Edmonds? Did he take out?
I think Sutton.
Oh, Sutton. Yeah, that's right. It was Sutton on that.
That was ugly.
He's reading run all the way. He's coming forward, and Sutton's trying to get out and trail on that, and those two collide, and it just leads to a very easy pitch and catch in that situation there. So, if I'm the Saints, I'm looking at that and look, make no mistake about it. It was a great play action. In those videos that Peyton Manning does, those, what do they call them? I forget what he calls those. What the actual title of that series is, but he goes in depth about talking about how important it is for these quarterbacks to carry out, even on runs, make sure they carry out the proper fakes at times, because they can freeze they can freeze a defensive player or two, but in doing so, and how important it is when they do run the play action fakes to make it look as close to a run as a handoff as possible. And Brady's obviously one of the better ones in the league that does that. So they were definitely fooled there. And like I said, I think Brady was 10 for 10 in this game as well. And another component of this, like it or not, is the Patriots' penalties on the offensive side of football certainly hurt them. Now, some of them were caused by the Steelers. I mean, late in that game, how big was that holding call that Stephon Tuitt drew?
It was huge. Huge.
And that's an easy call to make. Who was not Cannon? Who was the right guard?
Shaq Mason.
Yeah, Shaq Mason. He drew that on them. Nice swim move there. But I mean, make no mistake about it. And look, this is part of every game, every week. Stay out of those penalties there and stop getting yourself behind the chains. And the Patriots offense was unable to do that. And when they had an opportunity to make a play or a nice pass by Brady, they had a handful of drops in that play. I mean, in that game as well too. Not because it was a great put together plan by Keith Butler and probably. Well, I ain't no probably about it. I mean, it was probably the best single defensive scheme game Steelers have had this season.
Yeah, and you got to give credit to Steelers Nation too, because I know New England was penalized, disproportionately to the Steelers, 14-2, but 5 of those were false starts, and that's a crowd noise factor. That would happen late in the game. It happened early in the game, so I thought consistently, the crowd noise really played a factor in the getting New England to make their own mistakes and put themselves in the first and second and long. So you get 5 false starts. Your crowd's doing some good work.
Were you surprised Joe Haden won the AFC Defensive Player of the Week award?
I was a little bit, but I didn't know who else, was worthy of it. I didn't know what the competition was like. So congrats to him, though, because, hey, he made a big play. He deserves it.
And look, I thought he was going to be the lowest graded cornerback on the Steelers in this game, and PFF had him, tops. And I think one of the higher graded ones. I didn't look at their complete. I thought I saw something where maybe he was the highest graded or one of the highest graded ones this week. Sometimes I think they put. I mean, look, make no mistake about it. It was a huge interception. It was a highly, as far as difficulty goes as well too. It was a very important and great interception all the way around. I mean, it was an ill-advised throw by Brady trying to get that ball out of bounds. But how many cornerbacks actually make that play?
Yeah, it's a difficult play to make, being able to, ball control, because if that ball moves at all, it's probably going to be incomplete. And then the other breakup he had, there was a long pass down the right sideline where Haden, I think there was a little bit of miscommunication, kind of a stack formation for New England, and the receiver, I believe Edelman, got a free release, and Haden had to recover, and he did, and a nice job of it, and broke the football up. So I thought his run defense, pass defense, obviously the interception, just a really solid week for him.
Someone wrote me and said, "Why do you hate Joe Haden so bad?" No, I don't hate Joe Haden at all. He's easily the Steelers' best cornerback on the team, especially on the outside. I mean, the thing is, I try to put each performance, and look at it individually. There, he gave up 7 of 10 targets, I think, in that game. Now he did have 12 total tackles. But do you really want your defensive backs leading the team in tackles every week?
Well, some of the tackles he had were short curl routes and stuff like that, some of the underneath things that they were allowing. So I know usually 12 tackles is a bad sign, but I didn't think anything was super egregious down the field.
Now, obviously, if that pass interference call that he had against him, if that turns into a game deciding or game changing score, then maybe we're looking back. But I mean, look, like I said, he played well. I just thought he would end up being, because I figured that PFF would balance out the interception with the PI call there. I kind of figured that he would be, the lowest graded of the cornerbacks in that game. But that wasn't the case. And props. Here's another thing. Did you know that was his first Defensive Player of the Week award?
Really?
Would you have guessed that?
I would assume he got it somewhere at some point.
I would have too, but I went back and looked, and that's the first time he's had some. I mean, going back to his days with Cleveland,
his rookie year was a great year.
Yeah, he's had multiple. Has he had multiple interceptions in a game as a Brown? I'm sure he has. I thought did he pick off Flacco twice in a game?
Let's see. I'm pulling it up now. We'll see how good your memory is. Usually this is the thing you get right somehow, or I'm just like, okay, how did you know that?
It's because I'm one of them idiot servants.
Yeah, looks like he did pick off Flacco. Dave, what are you doing? He got Flacco twice in 2016.
Huh? Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. He got Flacco 2016 picking off twice.
All right. But how many times has he had 2 interceptions in a game?
Twice. 2016 against the Ravens and 2013 against the Bengals.
Okay, all right.
So this twice in his career.
All right. You would probably guess that maybe he had more than that, right?
I thought he would have done it his rookie year because he had 6 picks his rookie year. But regardless of PFF or whatever, he had a good week and he made the big play when the Steelers needed it, and I'm thankful for that.
Absolutely. And now we got to get a good test with Michael Thomas and some of their receivers.
Yeah, Dave, before we get to our interview with Nick Underhill, and I'm remiss, I apologize, I should have mentioned it at the top of the show, but we are talking to Nick Underhill of the New Orleans Advocate here in a couple of minutes to cover the Saints. Any other quick thoughts on this game that you want to get to?
Oh, wow, so much running through my head on this. Once again, you would like to have seen the offense put more points on the board in this one. I thought you did a great job of breaking down that first drive, right? I mean,
yeah, it was great first drive.
What stuck out the most about that?
Just the ability to kind of, like I said, give New England a taste of their own medicine, go empty, spread the field out, force New England to declare their coverages, declare their blitzes, stacking AB and Juju on the same side, so you knew all the coverage was going to roll to those two, and it was going to create man coverage on the backside. So, again, you look at the Vance McDonald touchdown, you got empty set, AB and Juju to the trip side to the top. You got Jalen Samuels, Vance McDonald to the twin side to the bottom. You're getting man coverage to the bottom because they doubled AB and Juju on the play. And so you have a great matchup with McDonald on their strong safety, Patrick Chung, and a little return route, shakes the coverage and gets them free. So the ability to know what New England wanted to do and use it against them, that's a great job by Randy Feener.
Both sacks on Jalen?
I put them both on Jalen. The first one definitely was. Tomlin Ben even talked about it and said that was clearly on him for leaking out totally, not seeing the blitz. The second one was tighter, was kind of messy with him and Filer. I put it on Samuels. You could argue Filer, but, the woes of a rookie back. But I think overall his pass pro has been better than I expected it to be.
All right, and you chewed a little bit of bubblegum while watching the tape.
I know they only punted twice, but if I have any chance at all to write about Danny Smith, I'm writing about Danny Smith. And I talked about New England, blocking 3 punts this year. That was a concern for me, and you'll have to read the article because, again, it's going to explain it better than I could here in the moment. But I thought, a different punt scheme that Danny Smith used really negated any threat of a big punt block opportunity for New England. So check that article out. And that's why I think Danny Smith's a good coach, because there is so much nuance in special teams. It's not just the big play stuff, make field goal, a punt, return, coverage, whatever. It's the schematic, the little things, the details that can prevent bad things from happening. I did a great job of that, so check that article out on Steelers Depot.
All
right. I think we're ready to talk to Nick Underhill. Again, covers the Saints for New Orleans Advocate. You can follow him at Nick Underhill, Nick_Underhill. We'll talk to him and get a feel for what to expect from the Saints.
All right, welcome back to the Terrible Podcast. It is, of course, Wednesday, and that means we have a beat writer from the opposing team that the Steelers will play this week. And this week it's the New Orleans Saints game going to be played Sunday afternoon in New Orleans. We are pleased to be joined, I think it's the first time on his show, Nick Underhill, who covers the Saints for the New Orleans Advocate. You can follow Nick on Twitter at Nick_Underhill. Make sure you read his work at The Advocate, theadvocate.com. And he also has a podcast that you can find at saintstalk.com. I'm sure they'll have a couple of good discussions on that podcast as well. Nick, welcome to the Terrible Podcast.
Hey, guys. Thanks for having me.
Nick, let's get started here. This is a Saints team that without a doubt tops probably one of the, if not the best team in the NFC. Season got off to a kind of a rocky start there with a 48-40 loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They've kind of rattled them off ever since there. Their lone loss coming a couple of weeks ago to the Dallas Cowboys there, a 13-10 affair. After that Week 1 game, what was kind of the general narrative, if you will, about what the 2018 Saints would be?
Well, the general narrative for myself was that, I was a moron and I had no idea how to watch football games because I was watching them all summer. I thought the defense was going to be great and, swarming and kind of be what they are right now. These last 6 weeks, they've probably been a borderline elite defense, and you didn't see that at the beginning of the year, and it was a little bit concerning. Marshawn Lattimore comes out, and Mike Evans just kind of kills him for 147 yards. And, not all 147-yard games are created the same. Eli Apple gave up 147 to Julio Jones a few weeks ago, and it felt okay. That first week, after seeing Marshawn, he was really a shutdown corner as a rookie, and that first week was not good. And if he's not playing well, the whole defense is in trouble. And I think that he probably thought that things were a little bit too easy that rookie year. And I think, this year he's had to kind of rededicate himself, and he's kind of getting back to where he was last year. These last 6 weeks again, he's come on, he's played really well. They brought in Eli Apple in that trade with New York, and he's played really well. He's risen the floor on that cornerback 2 spot. They had Ken Crawley there, and he was an undrafted guy. Last year was his second year. He played pretty well, but there were a lot of variances in his level of play, and the lows with Eli aren't quite as low. He is what he is. I think people, they know his name. They know that he didn't live up to that first round draft status, but I think he's kind of settled into this defense and in the role and what they need from him. He's the right guy. If they traded a 4th round pick, if that's a 4th round pick, he's a very good player for a 4th round pick. So, I think they've definitely turned things around on defense. The weird thing right now is the offense is not playing like it should. These last 3 weeks, maybe it's all road games, maybe being on the road hurt them a little bit. And maybe it's stupid to get, too worked up about Sean Payton and Drew Brees and what they're doing on offense. But, they've had a lot of trouble moving the ball, and they haven't looked the way that they should look. The Dallas game was really bad for the offense. Drew Brees probably lost the MVP award in that game. The first half against Tampa Bay, the next week they couldn't move the ball at all. Came on in the second half and won the game. And then just this last week again, it was a very, very subpar offensive performance against the Carolina team that's really been struggling on defense. So I think they got some things to figure out, and maybe just getting back in the Superdome will be the thing that kind of fix it. But it's a little bit weird right now. So, this game, you kind of look at it and think it could be a shootout a little bit, but, are the Saints going to find the gun this week? That's kind of the big question for them.
Yeah, and I was going to go along. You kind of answered a little bit the direction I was going to go. I don't want to call this a tale of 2 seasons for the Saints, because it's been more of a tale of the first 3 quarters and then maybe the last quarter here. But you saw them after that loss against the Buccaneers really settle down the offense. I mean, there was a stretch of about 5 games there where it looked like, man, can anybody stop this Saints offense? I mean, just putting up 30, 40, 50 points, during that span there. Then obviously I think about, the defense, because the offense was playing so well, got a good byproduct from that, because you definitely, when you start putting a hammer down on teams, it forces them, other offenses, out of their game plans and such. But then you get into these last 3 games, as you mentioned, really starting with the game against the Cowboys there, on into the Buccaneers, of course, the Panthers just the other night there. This defense is more than holding their own now. I mean, they're forcing turnovers. These defensive backs are ripping the football out. I mean, they have, like 18 or 17 forced fumbles, something crazy like that so far. They, of course, getting the interceptions on the back end. Is there anything that you can put your finger on that has this offense not clicking on all cylinders per se in these last 3 games, but yet this defense is really not that they hadn't been playing well, but this defense really coming on strong in these last 3 games?
Yeah, it's really weird that, for a while the offense was probably far and away the best unit in the league, the best offense in the league, and right now they aren't even the best unit on the team. I don't know how often that kind of happens where there's that shift, but it's a lot of things on offense. Their number 2 receiver is Traquan Smith. He was drafted this year, probably not quite ready to be in that role, and he should have been the third guy. That Tech Ginn's on IR, Cam Meredith's on IR. They were kind of counting on both those guys to, be there behind Michael Thomas, and now it's Smith and then Keith Kirkwood, an undrafted guy from Temple. He's been good, but he's an undrafted guy out of Temple. That's not who you want as your third receiver. The tight ends, they aren't really getting much out of that position. And then also Teron Armstead has been injured with a pec injury, and then this last week his backup Jermon Bushrod goes down with, I don't know, they didn't announce the injury. Well, we should find that out today. And then center Max Unger had a concussion. So, by the end of that game, that offensive line, which has kind of been the strength of the team, suddenly it's not there. And Brees needs that pocket. He's, everybody knows he's not the tallest guy in the world. He needs to be able to climb the pocket and feel comfortable and be able to, navigate there to, move the ball and everything. And when those guys aren't out there, that changes a lot. So also too, Brees, I think starting in that Dallas game, the word open for the Saints is kind of a relative term. Brees is going to throw guys open, and, he has that otherworldly accuracy. And when he's on, it doesn't matter if a guy looks covered, he's going to put the ball where only the receiver can get it. And I think these last 3 weeks, he's throwing technically accurate passes, but, if you watch him every week, it's just, sometimes if the ball's hitting the right side of the chest and the left side's open, it's like, oh my God, like that's a bad pass for Drew. It's not a bad pass for anybody else in the world, but for a guy that's completing 75% of his passes and always putting it where nobody else can get it, when he's not doing that little bit more to get a Keith Kirkwood open, it stands out a little bit. So I just think that they've been just a little bit off, and then you start taking guys out and it kind of unravels a little bit. And, it's one of those things that could click in an instant, but when it's not clicking, it definitely stands out.
I know we're talking about the offensive struggles, but just big picture, I mean, it's hard not to be enamored with Drew Brees, and you mentioned his accuracy, Nick. I mean, I think, 8 times in NFL history a quarterback has a completion percentage above 70% for a season. I think Brees is responsible for 3 or 4 of them, and is going to do it again and probably break his own record of completion percentage in a season. What's the secret to that? Obviously, he's a fantastic player with supreme accuracy, but how do his numbers get to that level that no one else can even really touch in this era where quarterbacks are putting up big numbers in yards or passing, but the completion percentage is for Brees so insanely high?
Yeah, and it's kind of good that you just asked that question like that to put it in perspective that their struggles are, high class struggles. It's struggling to make the payment on a Maybach or something. So
yeah, woe is me at 12-2, right?
Yeah, I mean, the secret, I guess it's just so many years in the same system and that synergy between him, Sean Payton, quarterback coach, Joe Lombardi, offensive coordinator, Pete Carmichael. I just think that he knows this system probably, and Tom Brady kind of has the same thing in New England. When you have that, and, they kind of probably got some of that stuff in Pittsburgh with just the stability of a coaching staff and a system, and people kind of understand things a little bit. And, I think that all helps. And, you get to that age, he's 39, he still has the athletic ability. The brain power is probably, it's only getting better every year. At a certain point, those things probably mesh. And even Brady was kind of having some of his, more efficient seasons later in his career. That's kind of started to wind down a little bit. But, I think that's probably the biggest secret behind it. And, these guys, they take care of themselves and everything now. And, the aging process has been slowed down. So I think that it's probably not going to be that abnormal to see guys as they get later into their careers become more and more efficient because they're smarter. They've seen everything. There are no more surprises. And as long as you have enough of that athletic ability, when those two things match, I think that you're going to probably see some of these guys have their better seasons, later in their years. And that's probably the biggest change, in the game these last few years. And it's probably going to keep happening. Him, Brady, they're probably the first guys to kind of get to that plateau. And, I'm sure there's going to be more of that follow as long as they avoid those damning injuries.
I don't think I've ever asked a beat guy about a third-string quarterback before, but Taysom Hill has to be one of my favorite players in the NFL for just everything that he does, because he's clearly not just a third-string quarterback. He catches, he runs, he tackles, he blocks punts. The dude does everything. Tell me about Taysom Hill. How did we get to this point? How did his role evolve in New Orleans? Did they see that right away? How did Taysom Hill become Taysom Hill?
We didn't see anything that he's doing right now in training camp. We saw him just playing regular quarterback all training camp, and playing regular quarterback probably, you hear all the coaches and all the players are talking about him. They're excited about him. I'm kind of watching him like, yeah, this guy's moderately accurate. I don't know. I'm not really seeing it. Then, week 1, there wasn't much of it. And then, week 2, week 3, it started coming out and they're doing all this crazy stuff. And, these last 3 weeks, they've actually kind of been a little bit phased down. He had 7 snaps the last 2 weeks, and then this week he had 12. And I think teams have started to catch up to it a little bit. Earlier in the season when he'd go out there, they'd defend him with the cornerback, and you're seeing more with the linebackers. So they're kind of getting that body back in the running game when they're doing these option things and some of the other stuff with him. But when it works really, really well. And I just think the element of surprises went away a little bit, but it kind of got him out of the slump last week against Carolina. They brought him out, and he starts running the ball, and he's such a big guy. He's impossible to tackle. If he had a little bit more lateral speed, he would probably be like the most deadly weapon in this offense. But he's more of a straight ahead guy. But once he gets that head of steam going, he's really, really hard to bring down. And for a while there, they were doing stuff that I don't think anybody's ever seen. They had to play with 3 quarterbacks out there. For a minute, it looked like they were setting up a pass to Breeze, and they actually tried to run one once, and it got covered after nobody was covering Breeze for a couple of weeks. So, I do feel like at some point they're going to pull the curtain back off it again, and it's going to be a huge part of a package. And you can definitely tell that Sean Payton's having a ton of fun designing plays and just coming up with different ways to use him.
Flipping over to the defensive side of football, a lot of homegrown talent, if you will, on that side of football. Cameron Jordan, Sheldon Rankins, those two, really good combination to have, and I think they do a good job of getting them off the field as well too. Is this by far, Cameron Jordan's best season, and how much? I don't want to take anything away from his play, but how much has the Saints had some big leads in some of these games played into a factor of some of this?
I don't know if it's his best season. He's been pretty consistent the last few years. I think Sheldon Rankins is definitely far and away having his best season. This is, before this year, I think you probably would have said that he wasn't living up to the status of a first round pick, and now he's got 8 sacks on the interior, and he's playing really well. And even his backup David Onyemata is another guy that's he was drafted mid-round pick, and he started to come on too quite a bit. And I think that coincides with them hiring Ryan Nielsen last year as their defensive line coach. I just think he's getting a lot out of those guys. But yeah, that's a fair question about the leads too. They were definitely able to tee off a little bit playing ahead. And I think one of the things too is you kind of looked at the run defense and wondered if it was as good as the stats said it was. Because teams, weren't able to run because they were up so much. And, that's one of the silver linings of maybe the offense struggling a little bit these last 3 weeks, is that you got to see how much of the defensive performance was real. And, they did really well against Zeke Elliott. They shut down McCaffrey on the ground most of the game. So I think that kind of answered those questions there. And they were still getting after the quarterback too. So I think it is real. I mean, but if they hadn't had those style of games, I kind of would have been left, sitting back wondering, can they shut down a running game in the playoffs? But I think they can. And I think that we definitely have seen that now.
When you look at a couple of one off-season ad and then one, of course, earlier this year, talking about Demario Davis, inside linebacker, and of course Eli Apple, the cornerback that they acquired. Demario is a guy Steelers. Alex and I really kind of looked at him a little bit, wondering if the Steelers might make a play at him in free agency this past off-season. He really had me. With both those guys, Eli Apple and Demario. Maybe it was easier to see, to predict DeMario would kind of have the success that he's had in his first season, which is tough to do, coming over from another team like that and really making an impact like he has. And then Eli Apple, when they acquired him, to me, when you look at it, kind of a rough start initially with Eli Apple, but he's kind of settled in there as well too. So, what did you think when they acquired both these guys and their maturation process in this defense?
On Eli, when they got him, my first thought was, we'll see. And I still kind of feel that way every week. Even when he plays well, going into this game, it's kind of looking at him like, okay, we'll see. I don't know if I trust him to maintain that level of play. Even against, Dallas, there were plays that weren't made that were probably the worst plays. There was one play where he got caught looking at the backfield and Gallup smoked him way down the field, and Dak just overthrew a pass. But if it was on point, it would have been a 55-yard touchdown. So, that's one that should be on his head that didn't end up on his head. But, he turned it around. Tampa Bay targeted 7 times with man, no catches surrendered, played really well this week. But this test this week against the Steelers, I think it's probably going to be the one that, I think decides kind of what the view of him is. I assume he'll probably be against Juju a lot, and that's probably the hardest number 2 test, number 2 receiver test that there is. So I could see that going either way. As far as Davis, yeah, he's really been probably not talked about enough. I think he's a big reason in the defense turning around. Like I said, they're near the top of the league in run defense right now. And last year they allowed, I think, 4.6 yards per carry. They were on the other end of the spectrum. He has a ton to do with that. This is a defense that used to just get murdered in the flats. He has the range to get out there and stop a lot of that stuff. And I think his presence has allowed A.J. Klein, who they signed last year. First year was probably a little bit of a disappointment, and I think that his presence has allowed Klein to be a little bit more sound and play a little bit better too. So he's been huge for this defense.
To flip back to the defensive line, how would you evaluate Marcus Davenport's play this year? First round pick you guys used to trade up for him. We all thought it was going to be for a quarterback. Instead, it's this guy from UTSA. I watched him at the Senior Bowl. It didn't feel like he was, quite at the level of some other guys. But how's he looking this year?
He got hurt. I feel like it's kind of stunned him. He's come back maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, but I do feel like it stunned him a little bit. I felt like he was starting to play well, and you were starting to see flashes, and you have seen those flashes kind of consistently throughout the year. And, the thing that they talked about, and I think, everybody knew that he was a project and kind of more of a long-term guy, but maybe they lowered the expectations so much that, right away you started kind of seeing some stuff with him that if everything comes together, he's so athletic. He has so much range. There's just things he does that a lot of guys don't do. And I think the way the Saints looked at it is if they remained a good team and they're picking, 20, 25, 30 in the draft every year, how are they ever going to get a defensive end? Those guys don't hit free agency, and if you're at the bottom of the draft, you probably aren't going to be able to get a good one. Every now and then someone slips through the cracks, but it's a tough position to be in. And, opposite Cam Jordan, they just really haven't had that guy. Alex Okafor has been decent, but I don't think that they were ever going to get a difference maker if they sat there. And I think, if everything comes together for him, he could be that difference maker. If not, and he just gets marginally better, I think he's still going to be a productive pass rusher. And, is that worth 2 firsts, in the long run? I don't know, but if it hits, I think it definitely is. And, I just think it's a week by week thing right now for him. And since coming back, like I said, there hasn't been a whole lot, but for a while, you kind of were seeing it out of him.
Nick, kind of slowly wrapping you up here. The Steelers against the Patriots this past week, and Alex and I talked about this earlier in the show. We saw them use 5 wide receivers on the field, and that's a rarity. In fact, they ran 14 plays against the Patriots with 5 wide receivers on the field. Most of those obviously were empty backfield situations there to kind of make the Patriots defense declare early what they were going to do coverage-wise and blitz-wise. Is this something they need? Well, let's face it, they're probably not going to be able to run, or one would think probably not going to be able to run that great against that Saints front on Sunday. Is this the way that you kind of try to get after this Saints defense? Is put all these wide receivers on the field, or take a guy like James Conner or Jalen Samuels and go empty and spread them out with 4 other wide receivers? Is that how you would attempt to attack this defense?
Yeah, I didn't even know they did that. That's interesting. But yeah, I mean, the more and more defensive backs you can put on the field for the Saints, the better off you probably are on offense. Ken Crawley's been shaky, so if he's the next guy in, he hasn't been good this year. We haven't seen him really since they got Eli Apple, but a lot of DPIs. He can be beat deep. The other safety, Kurt Coleman, which is really weird. I'm not sure I've ever really seen a team do this. He's their base strong safety, and then in nickel he comes out for Von Bell, which I don't know if I've ever seen that position, not specialized, but if he's on the field and you got him in coverage, you probably got an advantage there. So yeah, that's definitely something they're going to do. And I should probably ask you guys too, is James Conner going to play? I'm an Erie guy, so I would, I'm a little bit invested if he's on the field.
Yeah, it sounds positive right now, according to what Mike Tomlin said on Tuesday. James Conner practiced on a limited basis on Friday, ended last week as questionable, and then they downgraded him to doubtful on Saturday. He has missed the last 2 games. Mike Tomlin seemed to have a positive outlook. I think obviously when today's injury report comes out, if he goes limited or full today, I think there's a good chance for that. But yeah, the Steelers used 14 plays with 5 wide receivers on the field, and we were doing a research, our charting and all like that. We have to go back to 2011 was the last time the Steelers used 5 wide receivers on the field. So that's probably something they might want to try to do Sunday against the Saints, although it might be tough with that noise factor in the Superdome and all like that. All right, brass tacks here. Were you kind of a multi-tiered question here. Is this the toughest game for the Saints since the Rams game? Would be part 1, I guess. Second would be this line opened up at like 6.5. Were you a little bit surprised by that?
Yeah, I do think it is probably the toughest game they've had since that Rams game, easily. I don't even think anybody would even compare. In some ways, that this might be more of a true test of this team, because that was game 2, I think, of the Eli Apple era, and he really wasn't settled in, and they weren't able to play defense the way they do. They usually have Marshawn Lattimore shadow, somebody, typically the number 1 receiver. They did have him on Ridley against Atlanta and Eli Apple on Julio Jones in that game. So I am a little bit curious to see how they do that. I could see them, maybe trying to bracket Antonio and go on one-on-one the other way, but we'll see how that plays out. As far as the line, 6 points, that seems like a lot. The Saints at home are scary, but just after seeing these last 3 games, I don't know. I'd probably take the Saints by 3 in this one if I had to pick a score today.
All right, that was going to be my next question. How about a final score prediction for our listeners?
27-24, I guess.
All right, fair.
I don't know. I don't feel good about it, but that's what I'm going with.
we don't know what we're going to get on the defensive side of football from the Steelers this week either. It probably. Look, they took care of the Patriots, but this isn't the juggernaut Patriots teams and offenses that we've seen in the past. There, the Steelers defense obviously struggled some against that Chargers defense. So this will be a true test for the Steelers Sunday in the Superdome. Nick, we certainly do appreciate your time, and who knows? We'll keep. I think the Saints probably have a better shot at the Steelers of making it to the Super Bowl. But if the two were to somehow meet in Atlanta, we hope to have you back on the show again, and we appreciate making some time for us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, welcome back to Terrible Podcast. Good stuff from Nick Underhill. Again, you can follow him, and we really implore you guys to do so at Nick_Underhill. Covers the Saints for the New Orleans Advocate. Please let him know that you listen to the Terrible Podcast and you like the interview. Really would appreciate that. It means a lot to these guys, because if you're the life of a beat writer, the life is so busy, especially this time of year, and in a place like New Orleans where you have playoff implications and so much going on. So if you could just reach out to them if you are on Twitter, and just say, hey, listen to the interview. Thanks for coming on. I know Dave and I would certainly appreciate it, but Dave, always good to talk to Nick Underhill.
Yeah, first time that we've had him on before, and I wouldn't be surprised if he writes an article about that 5 wide receivers there. We had an interesting, quick little off-the-air chat with him right after we hung up with him. So it's always good to have a new guy, and I know he's covered them for I think 5 seasons. I think he covered the Patriots actually for a few seasons before that. So a new voice on the Terrible Podcast.
Absolutely. You want to hear from some other voices, Dave? I think we have some reader emails we can get to in the last 10, 15 minutes of this time.
Yeah. Let's start first and go back in time to Glenn Thomas that asked about that fourth quarter stop. Clock stoppage there against the Patriots there. It's such a organized chaos with Alex and myself and Matthew Marksy after these games of course during the game, so much to watch, so much to write about that we do. I mean, look, we miss a lot of stuff, and a lot of times we don't find this stuff until going back through several times. It's always good to get some heads up for a reader or a good question, and it was a good question about, and it didn't hit me until researching or got the email from Glenn about that fourth quarter stoppage. People wondering, why did the clock stop under 3 minutes there, where Samuels was tackled on the left sideline there by one of the McCourty brothers, and there was a penalty on the play. They assessed the penalty, and then the clock did not restart until the next snap. And because of that, I researched that there is a rule. The game clock does not restart under 5 minutes. It's under 2 minutes in the first half and under 5 minutes in the second half whenever there is a penalty either accepted or declined in those situations. So in essence, the Patriots committed a holding penalty on I think it was Malcolm Brown that held, and really kind of a ticky-tack call if you go back and look at it. The holding Marquise Pouncey there. I mean, I understand why it was called. I thought it was still a little bit ticky-tack, but regardless, it did. It gives the appearance that the Patriots got a free timeout in that situation. And if you go back and try to run the scenarios back through your head, if they don't get that penalty there, it's a first and 10 situation. Do the Patriots use their second timeout at the conclusion of that play anyway? Probably. Do the Steelers run on the next first down with Ridley again or somebody? Probably. And then at that point, do they use their third and final timeout? And then you could say, what would the Steelers then do on third down, assuming everything played out that way? Do they pass in that situation, or do they run and get that, get a little bit closer in Boswell field goal range and run that thing down to the 2-minute warning at that point? So, thankfully the game turned out the way it did, but had it not, would this be a little bit more magnified?
Yeah, I think you've been talking about this a couple days ago, and that's when I know I got a ton of comments about that rule and why the clock stopped after the game, but because of so many other things going on with the game and because it didn't affect the outcome, I just said, we'll deal with it later, because I didn't know for sure what the ruling was or the whole situation. But yeah, it certainly could have had implications. So I wonder if that's going to be one of those competition committee things that gets changed, maybe for a defensive call that gets declined, that could be tweaked, because it is kind of a loophole that can be exploited.
Yeah, and I have a quote in here in the article that I did on SteelersDepot.com from who was it? Michael Signora, who's the league spokesman. He addresses that same clock stoppage kind of rule, and the reason behind the rule change from several years ago, following a 2015 game against the Giants and the Cowboys. And in order to shorten game time while retaining the number of plays at the historic level of about 155, in ensuing years, a number, and this prior to 1995, the game clock started on the snap after all penalty enforcements. In ensuing years, a number of rules adjustments were made, including the reduction of the play clock from 45 to 40 seconds while starting the game clock on the ready signal after a player going out of bounds or after certain penalty enforcements. Because the end of the first half of the game are particularly exciting. Because the end of the first half and the end of the game are particularly exciting parts of games, there was no desire to reduce the number of plays that might occur in those time segments, and the traditional timing rules were retained for the last 2 minutes of the first half and the last 5 minutes of the second half. During those periods, the game clock starts on the snap after all out-of-bounds plays and after all penalty enforcement. So there's a little quick recap about that. Glenn, thanks for reaching out to us on that. James Krebs wrote in short one. Do you think benching Artie after the Hogan touchdown was an attempt to disguise the coverage the Steelers were using? That is, to try to make New England think that Hogan was Artie's man? My short answer would be no. Go ahead.
Yeah, mine's no as well. You're not going to play those mind games and win against Belichick. I think it was just because there was obviously some sort of communication, bit of a problem on that play. I think Tomlin realized when you get your most trusted communicators out there, and Sensible is clearly that guy over Artie, and I think that was maybe the big reason why Burns got the quick hook.
All right, I have talking about the wisdom of Belichick here from Josh Karadima. Josh, I hope I said your name right. If I didn't, congratulations. Dave and Alex, hey guys, love the podcast. I listened to it religiously since founded in June. A point of note, curious to hear your thoughts on the 4th and 1 punt near the end of the first half. I thought when watching it live that the Pats were trying to pull a fast one on the Steelers by getting them to sub quickly and cause them to have too many men on the field penalty. They snapped the ball with roughly 5 or 6 seconds on the play clock. Just curious if you think that could have been a possibility. I just think the Patriots would have gone for it on 4th down had Tomlin called timeout, and I think he was content with the lead at halftime. That's great observation on your part, Josh. I did not go back to check your math on the 5 or 6 seconds since you sent the email in, but make no mistake about it. There's certain situations where it looks like Belichick has thought this stuff out, and assuming that you're right that the ball was snapped roughly 5 or 6 seconds on the play clock, yeah, maybe he was trying to get them in a situation where maybe there would be the poor communication of getting a change of maybe a punt return team on the field and maybe getting the ball snapped and having too many men on the field that would give them a first down and keep that drive alive. And I guess the other thinking that you kind of bring up there is, maybe you get the Steelers to burn a timeout in that situation. And if they do you at that point maybe decide, does that change your thinking of maybe going for it on the 4th and 1 situation there? So, yeah, all great points. It's hard to know exactly, what Belichick was thinking, but I think you bring up good points in this. And, Alex, how did you think they handled that, Steelers?
I thought they handled it really well, and that's why I wasn't too mad, or at least not as mad as other people in the moment when it happened, because I was content with the defense staying on the field, letting New England punt the football, take the lead in the halftime, as the email mentioned. So I had no problem with that, and I got to give credit to the defense's response too, because this is stuff they practice, this is stuff they implement. Danny Smith talked about it a couple weeks ago. Do you have plans for your defense staying on the field in the punt situation and playing starters? And Danny Smith said yes, it's stuff we rep, stuff we go over. And as soon as the Patriots offense came out the field and the punt team came out, and it was the realization that the defense was staying on the field, Vince Williams, Mike Hilton getting guys in the right place, getting guys lined up. You didn't see panic, you didn't see confusion. Joe Haden knew immediately to go back to be the punt returner. So again, Vince Williams being that good communicator that Tomlin talked about and we mentioned at the top of the show, that was evident on that play, and there was no confusion, no hesitation of what to do. So again, credit to the individual, credit to Danny Smith, credit to Tomlin, because I think there was a plan in place for that response.
All right, thank you for that email. And here's one of my just came in that I have not even previewed from Eric Ford.
Oh, that's dangerous.
Yeah. Usually, as people try to hang me hung by the tongue, which I do a lot. Dave and Alex, where does Hayden's interception rank in terms of single regular season plays during the Tomlin era? It goes taking into account the do-or-die nature of the game, the point in the game, and area of the field in which it happened, and the fact that it was against Brady and he pulled it down over top Gronk and Edelman. He struggles to put anything except AB's immaculate extension ahead of it. Again, Tomlin era, regular season only. Boy, it's hard to. I can pull out of my brain. Yeah, definitely. Joe Haden picked off two passes against Joe Flacco back in 2000. I can pull
Yeah,
out that.
that's on the ready.
I can pull that stuff out. Look, it was a huge play. I mean, there's no two ways about it. It was 7-something minutes left in the fourth quarter. The Patriots obviously were driving. The interception came inside, technically inside the red zone at that point. I mean, the difficulty that we've already discussed of that. I mean, look, make no mistake about it. It was a poor decision on Brady's part, but the other team is paid to play the game and try to take advantage of those situations. And how many times this season have we seen that easier poor decisions than that have not, plays have not been made. So yeah, it was a huge regular season play defensively in the Tomlin era. Where does it rank, or in the grand scheme of things? I think maybe time will tell how the rest of this season plays out, because make no mistake about it, they turn around and get blown out about the Saints, blown out by the Saints, or just even lose to the Saints, and the Ravens beat the Chargers on Saturday night. What are we going to be talking about? And will that play? Obviously it was a big play and it shouldn't matter. I don't know. I get where you're coming from, Eric. I don't know how to answer that question. I don't think properly to say the magnitude in the Tomlin era defensive play.
Yeah, I mean, obviously that's a big question, and we're kind of thinking on our feet here. Obviously the AB play was the first one that came to mind.
Hey, look, this maybe the nature and the magnitude of this is what got Joe Haden the AFC Player of the Week award, when I coming out of the game, I thought it kind of a ho-hum game, if you will, from Joe Haden outside of that one play.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I thought of plays like the Mike Wallace touchdown to beat the Packers in 2009, but of course Steelers didn't make the playoffs that year, so ultimately, what did it really matter? I mean, the individual play was better, but the impact of it, I know, is the big question here. So I don't know, probably between maybe like 5 and 10, but in terms of top plays. But as Dave, you said, and I agree, it's kind of going to be a time will tell kind of question.
One more from Greg Jones. I don't think we read this the other day. Hello, fellows. In your direction of our landmark win last Sunday, can you please note and explain to me why did the ref stop? This is about the too many men penalty right before the Hogan play, right?
Yep.
From snapping the ball when the Patriots were changing late. He says his shoddy memory thinks it was prior to the AB touchdown. Wait a minute, maybe he's talking about a different one. He says the Steelers were down and ready to go. The ball was in play, he thought, and the ref came in from the offensive backfield to signal.
Oh, yeah, because the Steelers, I think, made a sub change, and you have to give the other team time to make their sub change too. You remember the play? I forget exactly the situation. It was inside the Patriots 10, but the ref came up to the line to not let Pouncey snap the ball.
Okay.
Is that what he's asking?
I assume I don't think he says. He says his memory says it thinks it's prior to, so it must have been when the Steelers had the ball. So you're probably right. I don't, Greg, I gotta be honest with you. I'm drawing a blank on that one. Alex seems to recall that, but I think Alex is right with, you have to give the opposition a chance to make substitutions as well.
It was either that, I forget the exact situation. It was either a sub issue or a refs not in play issue. But basically, if the refs aren't in place, or if there's a sub issue or a play clock issue, the ref will come up to the football and not let you snap it until everybody's set and the play can officially begin.
What did you think about the too many men right before the Hogan touchdown?
It was just late sub. The Patriots subbed out with like 28 seconds left, and the Steelers didn't get their guys on until like 8 seconds after the fact. And it wasn't as much, I guess, the late sub, though I think they could have gotten the personnel out quicker, but the guys weren't alert in the huddle. It was like Sutton and Burnett or whoever it was weren't aware that Hargrave and Bostic were coming onto the field, so there's got to be a better job of vocal communication, mainly from Hargrave and Bostic, to yell to guys to get off the field. So just little bit of sloppiness that you can't have.
All right, one final one. Sean Germanowski writes, that was the first time I can recall a Pats Steelers game being called fairly, so maybe when the zebra tables are equal, the Pats aren't so invincible. I'm not saying Butler didn't adjust well to scheme this game better, nor am I saying the Steelers didn't make mistakes of their own, but at least the Pats weren't penalty-free this time around, and it mattered in the end. Kudos for the Steelers for making only minor mistakes that really didn't matter much. Look, I thought the PI on Eli Rogers was a little bit ticky-tack. I thought, as I said, the Malcolm Brown penalty was maybe a little bit ticky-tack. However, false starts, and Lord knows we talked about one of those that didn't get called earlier in the season, obviously make a difference. And I thought Alex was smart to point out, the crowd. How many times, Penguins games or Steelers games, does it just seem like the key moments of the game, the crowd's not into it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Heinz Field doesn't have the best reputation. It's not Arrowhead for being this loud, intense crowd because it's a smaller stadium too, and it's more open. But yeah, the crowd really played a big factor, and T.J. Watt, other players were very open about how much a factor it played Sunday.
All right, did we get a passing grade on this one?
I hope so. Above the line performance.
And I'd like to announce that you and Matthew Marksy have both been selected to the Blogger Pro Bowl.
Where is the Blogger Pro Bowl held? Is it still just my basement, I think?
Probably south of or north of Orlando. Probably Ocala, Florida.
You're doing this Florida geography that I don't know about.
Yeah. All right. We will watch some more tape of the Saints, and we'll see what happens with this injury report moving forward on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We will get back after it again on Friday to preview a little bit more in-depth Saints and Steelers. As Alex mentioned, get on the Twitter machine and thank Nick Underhill at Nick_Underhill for coming on the show. First time Terrible Podcast host today. Great emails. Keep those coming. We read them all. We're going to try to make a better effort of trying to get to reading more of them as well. You can follow me on Twitter at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex Kozora on Twitter at Alex_Kozora. You can follow the show, of course, at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast at gmail.com. You can either praise me for being an idiot or an idiot servant or a savant or however you want to say it. In the meantime, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.